everybody. Welcome to our first Chemistry Club Department of Chemistry and Physics Alumni panel. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists this evening. First we have Ryan Juno, and who's currently a medical student at UNE's College of Osteopathic Medicine. We have Meredith Capuco, who works at the USDA Human Nutrition Department. Molly Wright, and she is a quality control analyst at IDEX Laboratories. And we have Josh Havlin, and he's a PhD student at GSBSE University of Maine. And then we have Katie Edwards, who is a PhD student at Dartmouth College. Anda Panayiotou, who is a research scientist at Lascoma LLC. And finally, we have Peter Cardona, who is a histology and imaging core laboratory manager at UNE. And so to start off, we are going to have you introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what it is that you're doing now.
Hey everyone, so my name is Peter Cardona, and like Jessica just wonderfully said, I'm the manager of the histology and imaging core here at UNE. I graduated from UNE in 2013, and I worked in a couple of different labs doing research as a research assistant with Dr. Tomlin and Dr. Small, and took a job here as a technician in the histology and imaging core. Did that for a couple of years, and took over as manager about 2 years ago now, so that's what I'm doing here. Lots of histology work, lots of microscopy work with biological specimens.
Hi everybody, my name is Anda Panayiotou, and very nice job with that last name, by the way, that was perfect. I graduated from UNE in 2011 with a double major in biochemistry and neuroscience. I did research here with Dr. Jeff Ganker for about 3.5 years. And then I got my PhD from Dartmouth in the chemistry department last January in 2017, and then I did a year's postdoc at Dartmouth in a different department. And I started my job at Lascoma as a protein and strain engineer last week. So it's still fresh, I'm still figuring out what I'm doing and where everything is, but so far I love it, and that's sort of where I am right now. So I'm happy to answer more questions about that later.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie, and I graduated from University of New England in 2012 with a chemistry degree. For most of that time, I did research in Dr. Holland's lab, and I got a lot of great experience doing that. And then I was able to become a laboratory technician when I graduated in John Stryker's lab, who at that time was here at UNE. He worked in comm. And then in 2014, I believe, I joined Dartmouth's graduate program, the molecular and cellular biology program there, and I'm currently working on my degree in genetics.
Hey everyone, my name is Josh Havlin. I graduated in 2011 with a BS in biochemistry and medical biology. I started working in Dr. Edward Bilski's lab in 2008, where I stayed until I graduated. And after I graduated, I helped build and manage 2 separate labs over in Stone Maris, where I stayed until 2014, I think, when I entered the GSBSE program through UMaine Orono. And I'm currently still here. I would say back, but I technically didn't move very far. But I'm still here doing work with Dr. Tamara King, looking at cancer-induced bone pain and advanced osteoarthritis pain.
Hi guys, I'm Molly. Let's see, I just graduated last year, so I know a lot of you, but not all of you. So let's see, I started a job at IDEX Labs in June of this year, and I began as a temp, and they were nice enough to keep me on in January, so now I'm salaried, which is really cool. While I was here at UNE, I did research with Dr. Small and Dr. Kierstead. Had a great time. Did a lot of different things, which was great. So for any of you young ones, just take advantage of those research opportunities. Yeah, so now I'm at IDEX, kind of hanging out there until I figure out how I want to proceed with my education, which I'm sure I will. So that's where I'm at.
I am Meredith Capuco. I graduated in 2012. Oh no, I came in 2012. What's wrong with me? 2016. And I currently work at the United States Department of Agriculture's Human Nutrition Department. So we do human studies where we feed them different diets. When I was here, I worked in Dr. Badlog's lab my senior year, and that was a lot of fun.
My name's Ryan. I also graduated in 2016 on Meredith as part of the Chem Club Dream Team. I also graduated in biochemistry. I worked in Dr. Ballon's lab while I was here. As you heard earlier, I'm currently a med student at Unicon, and currently a second-year med student, so I'll be going into rotation next year. And I'm thinking about either psychiatry or internal medicine.
Okay, and we're going to start with some questions related to your experiences at UNE. So when it came to your major, what was your experience coming into it and choosing it? Did you change between majors, and what made you choose your major and know that it was the right fit?
I like the fact that, it was a really small department. That way you kind of get to know everyone in your major. I didn't change my major. I remember my original choosing for biochem was I like biology and I like chemistry, and biochem was the combination of the two. And just that way, the reason why I found it's the right fit is just that way of thinking works really well for me. And like into medical school, it works well. And working through the physiology, then using that to bridge into pathology and pharmacology.
When I came to UNE as a freshman, I was a pre-pharm major, and I continued to be a pre-pharm major well into my sophomore year. But the entire time I was like, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? Do I want to be a pharmacist? And pretty much all the time I was like, no, I don't think I want to be a pharmacist, but I didn't know what other options, like what else I would do, so I just stuck with it. And then one day I went and talked with this really awesome teacher that I had, otherwise known as Dr. K. We were talking about majors, and I was saying that I wasn't really necessarily happy in pre-pharm. And she's like, well, have you thought about biochem? And I'm like, no. I'm like, tell me about it. And she told me everything about it, and I thought it sounded like a really nice mixture of biology and biochemistry and chemistry, all those other things. And I'm like, yep, this is it. So the next day I changed my major, and I'm glad I changed my major.
I forgot to mention that my degree is in biochemistry. Like Ryan, I also came in thinking like biochemistry, that's biology and chemistry, and I'm good at those things, right? It wasn't really, it's different. So I came in thinking like that. Ended up liking the major a lot, ended up liking the department even more. So I stuck with it, and it worked out really well, and it sets me up for all of these different future options, whether that be medical or veterinary or performing more research or lab work. So that was kind of my long-term plan with that major after I found out that it wasn't what I thought it was. So yeah, that's kind of how it worked out.
I didn't change my major to some extent. I think the first piece of paper I sent to UNE, I was declaring chemistry as a major. And I don't know if that was in junior year or senior year of high school. But after I took AP Bio in high school, I think I drifted more towards biology components of cellular mechanisms rather than chemistry, given my chemistry experience in high school was very, I wouldn't say limited, lower level, Gen Chem kind of level. But that's what pushed me into choosing biochemistry instead of chemistry. And I think I ultimately made the right choice. Also, joining Dr. Bilski's lab when I did doing pharmaceutical research was a nice segue into things that I was interested in. The biochemistry can be biochemistry major can be very tailored towards, you can technically go anywhere you want with it, I guess, but there's physical component of things, the cellular component of things, and then my area of interest was the pharmaceutical intervention of things. So the major kind of helped me and pushed me and tailored me to go where I'm going now.
So when I came into UNE, I was a secondary education major with a concentration in chemistry. As I was coming into the school, I was kind of convinced that I could always do the secondary education part later, but why kind of narrow my goals when I'm first starting off. So I changed my major to be broadly chemistry. And I'm really glad that I did that because it did give me more opportunities as I was leaving college. I decided I didn't necessarily want to be a middle school teacher. I wanted to do research, so it gave me the opportunity to go on to graduate school, and I'm not sure I would have necessarily had the same opportunities had I stuck with my secondary education major.
So I've been ping-ponged with my majors and my career trajectory quite a bit. I came in as a medical biology major, and really I don't remember why, what my initial reasoning was 12 years ago. But I knew I wanted to do research in genetics one day. And while I was here taking my biology courses, doing biology research, I came to understand that I wanted to answer biological questions with the level of detail that chemistry confers. And it was after taking organic chemistry with Dr. DeVue and Dr. Kierstead that I understood that I really wanted to belong in a chemistry department and pursue that kind of research. And I fell in love with NMR while taking chemistry. So I ended up pursuing my PhD in chemistry at Dartmouth, focusing on NMR dissolved structures of proteins, which was really cool and a different story. But so from medical biology, I added a biochemistry double major. And then later on, I think at the end of my junior year, they started offering the neuroscience major, and I was doing neurogenetics research. So I dropped the medical biology major, and I took up a neuroscience major. And then I switched them so that I would graduate as biochemistry neuroscience for one reason or another. Then I wanted to get a PhD in chemistry, but I studied biophysical chemistry. So I focused a lot on protein structure, protein biophysics, biophysical techniques that go with that, fluorescence-based techniques, NMR, spectroscopy, things like that. Then I did my postdoc in a computer science department, and I honed in on my computational skills more. And this all loops back to the fact that I was able to get this position at Mascoma, where what I'll be doing is a lot of genomic manipulation and a lot of genetics and a lot of what I initially started off hoping to pursue over 12 years ago now. But they hired me because they wanted a person with the set of skills that I have, more biophysics-based, to sort of liaise the molecular biology that they already do really well with focusing more on understanding the molecular details of the proteins they're studying. So all of this loop and ping-ponging and my long-winded answer is to say that even though what I wanted to do shifted and maybe I didn't always know what I was doing or why, I ended up back to what I initially wanted to do. Now with the type of training and skills that are really, they better equip me to pursue it the way I want to.
So when I first came to UNE at orientation, actually, I was a PT major, and really quickly I decided that I did not want to do that. I just didn't. Anyway, so I switched to medical biology right there at orientation, and that put me in a better track where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to be like more on the sciencey side of things with the biology, and I also had an inkling that I might want to do pre-med, so it seemed like it fit pretty well. And then a couple years later, my junior year, I decided that I wanted to bolster my resume a little bit, and I wanted to pick up a chemistry minor, and it didn't take a heck of a lot of effort to do that, just a couple of classes. So one of those classes I took was quantitative analysis, Dr. Tomlin, and that class definitely transformed me as far as who I was as a student, what I wanted to pursue. So I really fell in love with the chemistry side of things, and that sort of parlayed itself into the biochemistry major as well. So I ended up with a med bio and biochem double major, and graduated with that, and ended up doing something not that related really in the histology and microscopy field, but it was an opportunity that I only had because I had had that experience of sort of going from biology to biochemistry and being a little bit malleable in that sense. So basically when I took this technician job in the histology world, I didn't know anything about histology, which is the processing of tissue for microscopic analysis. Didn't really know anything about techniques or science or anything, but I really applied the chemistry side of the things that I learned to understand how that works. And more recently, since I've taken over as manager, I've really become interested in the photophysics, like the physics of microscopy and fluorescence microscopy and things like that. So we use fun stuff like lasers and mirrors and cool detectors and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely started in a very different place than I am now.
What were some of the biggest ways that UNE influenced your experience as an undergrad, and are there any parts of your experience that you wish could have been different?
You want us to leave the room?
I'd like to address Dr. K directly now. Well, I would say one of the biggest opportunities that UNE gave me was undergrad research opportunity. When I switched over to biochemistry and med bio double major, it was because of that chemistry class that I took, and I really wanted to do research, so I got into Dr. Tomlin's lab, and I really enjoyed that. Later on, I went on to work with Lena Small, doing research, and I just really liked being a lab rat at that point, and that's sort of the reason why I was able to hop into another position I didn't necessarily have that much experience with, but had a good groundwork to learn and how to move forward with. As far as anything I could have done differently, I could have been more involved on campus with like clubs and things like that. I wasn't really that involved, but I don't feel as though I was like lethargic or lazy at all. There was other things going on, I felt. But that's probably one thing I wish I could have done a little bit more of.
Yeah, in addition to the amazing opportunity to do undergraduate research that Pete pointed out, which isn't the case if you're an undergrad at an institution with large graduate programs. I found in grad school that what UNE gave me, the students from larger universities didn't have, were the writing and public speaking skills. Because of the small class size here, I didn't realize at the time that it wasn't common or normal or frequent for professors to take the time to tear to shreds every draft you submit or every presentation you give. And that made me the writer and public speaker that I was in grad school and beyond, because past undergrad people don't take the time to make sure that you develop those skills. Your graduate PI or your boss isn't going to take your drafts and proofread them or teach you how to make a good, compelling PowerPoint. So those skills really set me apart from peers of mine who didn't have them. And I was able to take advantage of that and have an easier time in grad school and beyond because of it. So I'm very grateful for that now, and I didn't realize it at the time.
So I'm going to echo both Peter and Anna and say that research experience is something that you would struggle to get somewhere that is not UNE. And additionally, when I came into UNE, I could not speak in front of people. You can ask almost any professor that had me as a student, and they will tell you how terrible I was at giving presentations. But I got a lot of opportunities to present my research, give poster presentations at national conferences, and I got experiences that I didn't realize most people don't get until they get into graduate school. Additionally, I was a student who struggled a lot as an undergraduate. I probably would have fallen through the cracks at any other university. But because our department is so small and very caring, all the professors, I think, give more than 100% towards making sure that their students are successful. I was able to graduate, and now I'm stronger than I was when I got here.
But I think this is going to be a common theme for the rest of the panel. My experience as an undergrad doing research was also hugely impactful. I think I remember honors bio with Zog and Edward Bottlefingers.
That's where it all started.
Yeah. So my first experience doing research in a class as a freshman, I remember thinking to myself, coming up with questions, setting up experiments, looking at results. Doing that, I remember thinking, this is something I could do the rest of my life, which, bright-eyed and naive freshman. But that pushed me to work in Dr. Bilsey's lab, where I got to spend 3.5 years doing exactly that. And much like much like everyone said, the experiences you get doing undergraduate research, they go beyond what you learn in the classroom. They give you an outlet to apply things you've learned in the classroom. A lot of the classes we took here involved some form of public speaking. Medicinal chemistry had us present at the undergraduate research symposium, and that was a literature review. That was, looking back, an amazing experience. Doing it sucks. But once you get beyond it, I think you can look back and actually value what you learned and what your professors were trying to get you to do and get out of the experience. Anything different? Are you going to do question 4 later? Okay. They're similar. I would echo what Pete said. I wasn't very involved with much of anything on campus. I spent my time either in the lab or outside of the lab with the cross-country team. Looking back, I should have been more involved in things like Chem Club or activities on campus. I think I would have got a lot more out of my undergraduate experience doing that.
I don't know if I can state any better. That you should definitely take up the opportunity to do some research, because it was really helpful, and a great opportunity that you don't get many places. And also just the wonderful department and having professors who are vested in your success was so awesome. So I guess I'll focus on things I could have done differently. One thing that I really do wish I had done differently, and touches on what a lot of other people have said already, is I wish I had gotten involved sooner. By the end of last year, I had done writing, worked as a writing tutor, and I was president of Chem Club, and I'm really proud of that. But as a freshman, as a sophomore, I wasn't doing very much. And I think I would have preferred to have, started early and gotten all those experiences in as soon as possible, because it kind of flies by once you start. So
unlike everybody else on the panel, I'm not going to say undergraduate research was a big thing, because I didn't start until my senior year, so it didn't have as big of an impact on me as it did my cohorts over here. But for me, one big thing that I really enjoyed at UNE was just all the hands-on lab research, lab classes that we had to take, like the organic chemistry lab and biochem lab, advanced biochem lab, all of those. I really enjoyed that hands-on learning different techniques portion, because I've used a lot of those techniques in my work now. And also, I enjoyed being a teaching assistant for organic chemistry later, because then I was able to help other students with something I've already done and at times struggled with. That's one thing I really enjoyed here at UNE, because I know at other colleges you don't get to be a TA until you're a grad student. my brother actually apparently bragged about that. He's like, yeah, my sister's an organic chemistry TA. And I'm like, why would you brag about that? But apparently that's a thing. And then if I could do one thing differently, I think I would definitely have tried to done the travel abroad programs that we offer here, because they make it so you can do it your sophomore year, but I guess I was just too nervous about taking organic chemistry in another country. But I wish I had. It sounded like it was a lot of fun.
Would have me.
I would have had Dr. K, though I did have you anyways.
So I guess like everyone, like most other people, another thing for me, I also like research had a big impact on me, but unlike the other people, it kind of steered me away from things because like I enjoyed doing the research and it was a great opportunity, but like being there, I realized at a time where I wasn't sure if I wanted to do medicine or research, like I couldn't do this the rest of my life. And I enjoyed my experiences in the medical field so much more. So that kind of gave me the push to go towards medicine. Something that I wish I could have changed, like other people, I wish I got involved sooner, just so I could get more opportunities, be bigger impact in chemistry club earlier on, and all these other points.
Now that your undergraduate experience has been completed at UNE, how have you managed to stay in contact with your friends, classmates, faculty, and others here?
Well, for faculty, I'm here, so I run into them. Usually, like Dr. Moen, I run into at the gym. Dr. K ran up to my car, knocked on the window once. A couple of my friends from undergrad, one's she's living in Wales at her grandparents' place, where her grandparents have a summer home and she's going to the advanced nursing program. I have a friend that's in a P4 and for pharmacy school, so 4th year. Another friend that was with me, so a lot of them are around here, so you have to either, like, keep in contact through most of them on Facebook, really, I think, is probably going to be a trend.
I keep in contact with most of my undergraduate friends through group chats. I'm in a group chat with Megan and Ryan, and Megan Perry, if you guys don't know her, and this guy. It's a very interesting conversation all the time. But my other friends, they're in pharmacy school, and I'll text with them. And because I started off with a pre-pharm major, most of my friends are in the pharmacy program. But yeah, mostly texting is how I contact them. And then I've come up to visit a time or two to see my old teachers, because they're awesome.
Oh gosh, how do I keep in contact with people? Well, that's kind of why I came here tonight. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, Dr. K and I have been collaborating on a couple of things recently. Otherwise, I mean, I just kind of let the cards fall as they may. Yeah, maybe I should work harder at it, actually.
I think I'm probably pretty fortunate that I've been here as long as I have been, and I have the hobbies I have. So obviously Facebook I use to some extent, not a whole lot. LinkedIn, actually, I don't know, Paula Bala sends you messages. Every once in a while, a student from our class will message me on LinkedIn. She's at a school in Rochester in a PhD program, just checks in. Hi, how you doing? How your experiments going? And that's really nice to hear from people we met 11 or 12 years ago. But I also, every summer I organize a trip to Cabasacanti Lake up in central Maine for the cross-country team. I think you went last year, right? Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what year we're on now, because I've lost track. It's the 3rd, 4th, or 5th year. But every summer for a weekend, some of us get together, 10, 12, maybe 15. So we meet every summer and reminisce to some extent. I go fishing. That's the only reason I know why it's there, where it is, and how we go is because I go fishing there. There's that, and then also I'm fortunate in I guess, the direction my research has taken me. So every fall, the Society for Neurosciences has an annual conference, and I think I meet, besides that trip every summer, I meet more people there every fall that I knew during undergrad here at uni who had similar research experiences that go to this conference too. So I see Katie, this is the first year, but see Katie there. I oftentimes run into a student who was 3 years ahead of me that mentored me while I was an undergrad. He goes to the conference as well. Taylor Collinsby, I don't remember, was he in the chem department?
It's not anything behind you, he's already.
Yeah. My class.
Yeah, he was in the
Med Bio.
department.
Med Bio.
He's been at the conference the past year or two. So that's always a lot of fun, getting together and talking about where we went, what we're doing.
I'm really terrible at keeping in touch with people. Anna and I occasionally worked in the same building, and we wouldn't see each other for weeks sometimes. Yeah, we live in the same town. We hardly see each other. That's on me. I don't go on Facebook very much, and Josh just reminded me that I usually keep track of Holly through LinkedIn, but I haven't signed on to LinkedIn in over a year. I have a draft email to both Dr. K and Dr. Mullen that has been sitting in my draft inbox since my first month at graduate school that I never started. So, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at keeping in touch with people. It doesn't mean that I don't love them when I come back and get to see them.
I should be better at seeing Katie. We do work and we're used to in the same building, but other than that, other than my inability to see Katie in my own town, I think that about a third of my Facebook friends are former UNE faculty and staff, which, again, peers of mine from larger places find that mind-boggling. But it speaks to the kind of place this was and the kind of experience I had here, so that's how I stay in touch with not just former staff and faculty and mentors, but my friends from UNE. And my friends from UNE are really friends for life. I think it's interesting, and I don't know that anyone talks about this, but it was a common phenomenon, at least in my cohort, that for 2 or 3 years after undergrad, we all sort of lost touch. Life just happens. Life after undergrad, no one really prepares you for that. Your career, yes, but the mental health and personal development topics and aspects that come up are not something that anyone in any club can prepare you for. But then after about 3 or 4 years post-undergrad, we all sort of got in touch again and came back to it and got together, and it was as if no time had gone by. And I know that's a cliche and it sounds so sappy and cheesy, but it's absolutely true. So now we're scattered all over the place, but we stay in touch via texting and Facebook and other things, and it's fantastic. And it really is the same people I used to go to Sodexo or the library or you name it, all the places that you guys frequent as well. So thank goodness for Facebook.
Yeah, like these guys have said, pretty much stay in touch, text, Facebook, Messenger, whatever. A lot of my friends from school actually still live in the area, so I see them quite frequently, like in the Portland area. A lot of good meme chats going. And sometimes FaceTime. Like I have some friends who are like across the pond, over in England, in Thailand, all over the board. So we're lucky to have the ability to use the internet to communicate with those guys.
So when it came to the transition from undergrad to graduate school or work, how difficult was it, and what were the biggest differences between your expectations and the reality of it?
As far as the transition from school to work for me, I'm probably the worst person to start with because I graduated and continue to work here and then am still working here. So it was really hard. It was very easy for me in the sense that I didn't have to familiarize myself with a new environment at all. I mean, a lot of my friends were still in school. I graduated in 2013, so I was working on campus and I still had friends who were underclassmen that I would see. And it wasn't that much different, honestly, but the transition as far as being a student to being a professional was pretty easy in the sense that, again, I was still kind of seeing and being around a lot of the same people, even same faculty. So for me, it was pretty easy, and it's pretty laid back atmosphere here in academia. So it's not as if I have to drum up a whole new way to communicate with people or anything like that. It's pretty relaxed.
I think this might be the first time I'm admitting this in public, but I had a really hard time leaving UNE and starting grad school. Not in terms of courses or professionally, but personally. I had come to love it here so much, and I still call UNE home, that I had a very hard time leaving and adjusting. I used to come back every couple weekends just because I couldn't handle being away. So I think that it took me over a year and a half to really feel at home in Dartmouth. And I don't know if you've ever been to Hanover, New Hampshire, but it's not that different from here. It's small and quaint and very Gilmore Girls-esque, right? But so for me personally, the adjustment was tough. I had been a straight A student here, and I got to grad school and I failed my first exam. And then I bounced back, but it was sort of adjusting to a different setting and to the different rigors. So that made me feel like, it gave me huge imposter syndrome, and I don't know that imposter syndrome ever really goes away. But figuring out how to deal with that and how to bounce back and how to adjust in a new place that I didn't know I could love as much as I love here made the transition really hard at first. The story ends well. I'm very happy, and it does happen, but it's okay to have a hard time, and it's okay to talk about it.
Like everyone else, after I graduated from UNE, the transition was a little bit weird because I was trying to get a job. I knew based on my grades that I was not going to get into graduate school or any sort of school. So I was mostly just filling out applications, and I will tell you that grind is pretty difficult. You just fill out application after application, and sometimes you even hope for the rejection letters because that means that they at least opened up your application and looked at it, and sometimes you don't get that. But I managed to get a job here at UNE, and in between the time period, I was able to work with Dr. Tomlin and Dr. Kierstead a little bit. They helped me out through the transition period. So I was able to start working as a lab technician for a professor who was in comm. And I would say that the lab experience that I got at UNE made me incredibly prepared for life doing that job. And yeah, I would say that once I got to the job part, I felt incredibly prepared. And then over the next couple of years, I prepared my applications for graduate school. And I would say that it also very well prepared me for graduate school. I felt like I could kind of hit the ground running in any lab that I rotated in. I just felt at home in the lab. And I felt at home, I guess, talking about my experiences and being okay with where I was. So I would say the transition was difficult. At some points, it feels a little degrading because you know how hard you worked, and it can be hard to sell that to other people. And there's a whole bunch of other people out there who also worked hard, who will get the job, or maybe some people who didn't work as hard who will get the job. And sometimes it depends on connections. But overall, once I got where I wanted to be, I definitely felt prepared.
What was the wording of the question again?
So how was the transition from undergrad to graduate school or work, and what were the biggest differences between your expectations and the reality of all of it?
So I think similar to what Pete said, I may not be the best example to base any decisions on. So I worked in, like I said, Dr. Bilski's lab, doing opioid pharmaceutical research in the pain field. And when I graduated, I moved down the hallway where I built a lab doing opioid pharmaceutical pain research. So it wasn't a big transition or a big change. I still lived down at the end of Hills Beach for 3 years after that. So I definitely didn't have any anguishing transitional experiences. But I guess to that extent, I mean, my work here at uni and the classes I took here at uni prepared me very well for the transition. I think I was just very, very fortunate that it was so easy. And then going to grad school, I think, so ultimately I ended up back in the lab that I worked in previous to grad school. So, but I spent a couple months rotating in different labs at different schools. It's just the way my program works. And I think the basics I learned from classes here at uni, along with the tools and the skills I learned doing research here at uni, prepared me to move to different schools in different labs in completely different research fields. I think it prepared me to at least stand on my own two feet when I got there. I remember the first lab I rotated in was like an environmental toxicology cancer lab, and they worked on DNA damage repair. So we're looking at proteins in a nucleus, and I've done neuroscience research for 3 years, and we don't talk. At least the work I was doing, we didn't talk about nucleuses. So like getting back to thinking about DNA and how it's affecting our questions was a big jump. But like I said, I think everything I learned here helped me get the hang of that faster than some other students, I think, that I was around.
I really hope I can be a good resource for this question because I still am in transition, I think. Since I just graduated last year, let's go back to 2 weeks before graduation, and I applied to this job at IDEX, and I'm like, all right, I have enough money to make it through the summer, and then I need a job. And that was actually the only one I applied to. So, I mean, quality control temp set my standards at a pretty manageable level, but I was also very fortunate to have gotten that just first time around, and I think that really says something about the level of education and experience you get here. This school kind of breeds, excited, smart people who love science, so it was really good for me. But I think the challenging part of this transition ultimately has been, trying to find out how to be a person. So figuring out what your role is in your new job. In my case, it was being surrounded by a bunch of people I'd never met before who were all older than me, and that was fine. A little different, but fine. And figuring out where I was going to live and how to pay taxes, and if I should get a bank in Maine, how to renew my license if I'm going to be working every single weekday, and my license is from Vermont. So a lot of that was difficult, just the little minute details that you don't really think about when you're here, because you don't have to. So yeah, I think that's been the biggest struggle, is just figuring out how to be a person.
So I had a really easy time moving into my job because I actually had worked at the USDA for an internship the summer between my junior and senior year. So literally I just went right back to what I had been doing the summer before. And I graduated knowing I had a job for me because I was offered the job in February. So I knew I had a job. I only applied to one other place, and then I was offered this job at the USDA. So I didn't have to apply to a million different places. I just started back where I was. I knew everybody, so it was a lot easier. I think the biggest transition for me was just moving from, I'm from a small town in New Hampshire and went to college in a small town in Maine, and then moving to Maryland where there's people everywhere in traffic. And it was just like a really big like culture shock. Like you could be stuck in traffic for an hour and a half and you'd still have to get to work on time. But so I think the biggest transition was just moving down to Maryland. But I was lucky enough that I have family there, so I was able to stay with them until I found my apartment.
So like some other people, my transition was pretty easy because I'm still at UNE, and it also kind of put me, also like going right from undergrad, kind of put me at a little bit of advantage to some of my other classmates because I'm fresh out of college and I got that routine down of studying where other people had to get back into the thick of things. And I also love the independence of like making your own food and, you know, going to the grocery store and doing all that. One of the biggest differences I was surprised of, going into grad school, I expect like everyone to be adult and mature. And with the, you know, like average age is 26, but you're like, wow, a lot of people aren't as mature as you expect them to be. So you gotta kind of adjust for that a bit.
So when it came to med school, grad school, and jobs, how did you research different places and how do you best prepare and market yourself?
I think this. Well, one of like preparing for where I want to go, I want to just like kind of know myself and having that reflection and self-awareness, and kind of exploring the options of what you can do, whether it's research, PhD, or med school, and kind of what excites you, and then I gotta want that. I think when choosing, I kind of just want to. I like DO schools, and I like the philosophy of it. And UNE, I want to stay close to my friends. For marketing yourself, I think it's important to be very open about your strengths and weaknesses because they'll take a look at that, and if you're open about talking about that, especially in the interview, I think that puts you in a good spot.
So I had to market, basically to get my job, I marketed myself my junior year of college. So really just to market myself, I just made sure I had like a really good, as strong as I could, resume/CV so that they would consider me. And I definitely made sure I focused in my CV more on like my lab work and on like any leadership things that I did. Like I was an orientation leader. So I made sure I like highlighted those things so that they could see that I could work independently in a lab. I knew what I was doing. But since I didn't really have to market myself for the job for graduation.
I'm probably a bad person to talk to about this because I only applied to one job and just happened to get it. But I can definitely talk about that interview because I definitely sold myself there and it worked. So I think, once you get to the position where you get to be interviewed, or even before that, the best way to keep yourself motivated is to remember how excited and interested you are in the things that you've learned about and the things that you want to continue learning about. So during that interview, I talked a lot about what I'd done on my research projects, and they loved it because I was excited about it, and I talked about all the little details that I just found really interesting, even though they weren't that interesting. And, I think the best way to market yourself is to be genuine about it and to make sure that you're focusing on what you're really interested about. But I guess first you have to get to that point where you can do that. So listen to the other people here.
I guess I'll kind of try and do both. So if I was applying for jobs now, I'm probably going to do a better job of this. I know what my CV looks like, and I know the things that I highlight on my CV. So when I initially was writing my CV, or when I'm thinking about applying for jobs, I try and reflect on things that I've done. So you can put in, did this thing. I did this thing, and it was fun. But what you really want to focus on, looking beyond that, is what you learned when you're doing that. What skills did you develop? what skills did you use? What challenges did you face and overcome? So I taught a lab here a couple of falls ago, and you know it's listed on my CV. I taught a lab, but a couple pages down, I emphasize what I did for teaching at lab. You know, independent development of laboratory questions, procedures, grading. Grading takes a lot of time, and I guess coming up with good questions for quizzes, exams takes a lot of time. So I think I lost where I was going, but skills, activities, and lessons, and like I said, challenges that you've overcome doing those things. Marketing for grad school, I think something I didn't do as well as I should have during the interview process is stay positive. Like was mentioned previously, it never really helps to go into an interview process and be negative about anything you've done. If you think about something negatively, try and reflect and think of the positive things. What did you learn to do differently? How would you avoid whatever's making you upset about the thing you remember? And be confident in what you know. Be confident in things that you know how to do. I have one more. I guess.
So for when I was applying for jobs, I will definitely recommend going to the Career Services Department because they have counselors there who will work directly with you. I had someone who went through draft after draft of my CV when I was applying for jobs and also did a mock interview with me because public speaking was probably my weakest or one of my weakest points. And I have a lot of difficulty having the self-esteem to say positive things about myself in an interview, which is something that you really have to be able to do. Yeah, I didn't get paid to say that. Definitely use Career Services. They're amazing. They helped me so much. I definitely would not have been able to put together a CV without them. So for the job application process, I will definitely echo to stay positive. Unlike some other people, it took me multiple rounds of applications for me to get my foot in the door anywhere. And I went to 2 interviews on the same day and eventually got declined for both of those jobs, partially because I was very honest about the fact that I wanted to leave after a year or 2 and go to graduate school. But I think that was important, even though I desperately needed a job. Because you don't want to get yourself stuck in a revolving door. You should go in knowing what you want out of an experience. And if that experience is not going to give you what you want, then you should wait for a different experience, no matter how poor you are. And eventually I did get a job that I wanted, and that gave me a really great experience that helped me get into graduate school, which was my ultimate goal. So in terms of preparing myself for graduate school, I knew that my grades were really poor. My GPA was definitely not going to get me into graduate school under no circumstances. So I knew that I needed additional research experience to kind of bolster myself before I went and did that. And I'm really glad that I did. It gave me just a whole nother level of mentoring experience, and it really it made me love what I was hoping to do so much more. And I think that's really important as well, because research is really hard, and the reward usually isn't monetary, so you have to really love what you're going to do research. And also to mentor students, you really have to love it. So I kind of prepared myself by knowing my weaknesses and knowing what I needed to do to get around them. Additionally, I didn't give up. I think graduating, it would have been really easy, and at times it was very tempting to say that I would never be able to get into graduate school. But I did, and I got into a really good program as well. And I did that by kind of just staying the course and just always working towards what I wanted. And so to kind of conclude, when I went to interviews at graduate school, I knew that I needed to talk about my weaknesses as an undergraduate, which was really hard to do. And I was prepared to talk about them, about the mistakes that I made. I knew that I wasn't going to go in there and make excuses. I was going to admit that I made mistakes and be prepared to discuss why I wasn't going to make the same ones as a graduate student. And no one actually asked me about my grades, so I didn't actually have to do it. But you should be prepared to do it if you have to. So yeah.
So I want to mention briefly both what I did to transition to grad school, but also then from academia into industry, which is not something that anyone really prepares you for in academia. So as Katie mentioned, the career services at UNE are fantastic. I haven't seen Dartmouth focusing as much of their career services resources into helping undergrads, so take advantage of it. I had my CV and my personal statements. I had multiple professors read through them and offer suggestions and comments, and I intently always choose to send my stuff to people who I know are going to be critical and honest, because I want to know what is wrong or what's a red flag with what I'm writing and presenting out there. Having my friends tell me it's nice isn't going to help me. So I had multiple professors look through my materials, but I also, Jeff Nevers doesn't work at career services anymore, does he? He does. So I sat down with Jeff Nevers. I think we worked on that stuff for 2 months prior to the date where I sent my materials in, and he taught me all about switching from passive voice, which is what we use in scientific formal writing, to active voice and power verbs and displaying confidence and how to organize a CV. And he tore everything upside down into shreds, and it was fantastic. I applied to 9 grad schools. I got into all 9. I had a surprise at one of my interviews where, my personal statement was strong and my GPA was strong, and I had the 3.5 years of research, and all of that mattered. But this one faculty member told me something that stuck with me and that changed the way I thought about my career afterwards, which is why I want to mention it. He told me that what set me apart from everybody else with the great GPA and the years of research experience and the extracurriculars and everything else were my recommendation letters. He said that in his 20 years, he hadn't seen recommendation letters where it transpired so well that these people loved me. Not just because I was a good student, but as a person. And that's why they made me an offer in that program. So that changed the way I thought about what I was doing and about my career. And I decided right then and there that I would always try to be in a place where I could establish those kind of relationships with the people mentoring me and with my peers and with my supervisors. And it's worked out really well for me so far, because that's how I got into grad school, and from grad school to my postdoc, and from my postdoc to my job right now. I ended up not accepting that program because it was at a big school where I would have been just another grad student. So it was sort of ironic, but I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind. At least I think it is. And then from grad school to the job, this is a little different because now I switched gears completely out of academia. So there, really the important thing is tailoring your resume and your cover letter for each specific job. Showing that you have read their website and you know specifics, regurgitating back the specific language they use in the job posting. Whatever words they say for every entry they want to see, those words you write them back exactly as they are in the cover letter and in the resume. And most people don't spend more than 30 seconds looking at those materials, but they still have to be perfect. So make sure that whatever they want to see is at the top of your resume and your cover letter. I interviewed for 2 jobs at 2 biotechs around Hanover. In both places, all 30 people at each company had my resume and my cover letter. And the managers didn't spend much time looking at them, but the individuals who would have been my peers had notes and highlights and questions. And you have to remember that everyone is interviewing you, not just your potential boss or your potential team. The administrator, the secretary, the janitor, the people you have lunch with are all going to be asked about you and who you are as a person. And honestly, most places, unless you're going for a super big company or a super big institution, in a lot of places like UNE, where culture matters, I would say that about 50% of what you're hired for is personality and potential. So those things are really important. Those are sort of my tidbits from my week in the corporate world, if you want. But I was told as much. I was told that the decision had to be unanimous for them to hire me. And that wasn't just about skills and my resume and my track record. It was about my personality and how I handled myself with every single person I met there.
I think as far as marketing yourself goes, it's really important both with writing the written materials that you send out, whether it's a resume, your CV, or your cover letter, and in an interview, is to be authentic. Definitely be yourself, know what you know, and don't try to pretend like you know things that you don't know, because that can come back to bite you eventually. Don't say that you can speak Chinese if you're not able to speak Chinese, or if you have 1 semester of that, so that kind of thing, but even less severe than that. And then to be enthusiastic, that's one thing that people really enjoy. They don't want a person who's just monotone and this kind of guy at the job. That's not going to make it very fun for anyone. So it doesn't mean that maybe you're not that kind of person, but at least try to be personable when it comes to any kind of person-to-person interactions. Like Anna said, it's going to be more than just the manager, who's the hiring manager, who's going to evaluate you. It's going to be a lot more than that. And yeah, marketing yourself, it's a skill, and so it takes time to work at it. Like when it comes to your resume and cover letter and things like that, definitely don't feel like you have to do that all yourself. Get other people's eyes on it. It doesn't matter who it is really, just have them take a look at it and see what they think. Maybe somebody will pick up a punctuation thing. Maybe somebody will say, maybe you don't need your lawn mowing experience from freshman year of high school on here. So just as many eyes as possible on that kind of stuff is for the best.
And before we open the floor to student questions, is there any final advice you want to throw out there for us?
That's a broad category, isn't it? I think we've had a lot of pretty similar experiences up here, I think, between the research and where we came from. Obviously, we went to UNE, and a science-based school. I would say, for me, in particularly with regard to what to do when you're graduating your undergraduate, don't feel as though you have to go to grad school right away or apply for grad school right away if you're not ready. If you know that you want to, go for it. By all means, go for it. Hopefully you get in. But if you don't feel like you're ready, which I didn't really, I always intended to go to grad school, whether it was for a master's or a PhD, I'd always intended that. But when the time came, I just really wasn't ready to pick a pinpoint field that I wanted to focus on. It's better to maybe pick a range of areas that you want to be in before you sort of hone in on that single one. So don't be afraid to take a gap year or 2 even, or more, in my case, we'll see. But basically, that experience can be just as good as your undergraduate experience. Depends what you do. Don't spend it just binge watching Netflix the whole time, but do something with it, and it's going to help your resume. It's going to boost your application moving forward.
Advice, just so broad, so general. So I guess whatever you decide to do after UNE, whether it's grad school or med school or a job or a year or 2 off, try not to lock yourself in something that isn't what you ultimately want to do in life. So don't just go through the motions and get stuck in something because it's comfortable. A professor in grad school once told me, don't get comfortable. And he was right, and by that what he meant, I think, was, don't be afraid to take a risk and start something new. When I applied to grad schools, my goal was to ultimately work at a small liberal arts school like UNE and do the whole tenure track thing. And obviously that's changed throughout the years, but admitting to myself that I wasn't so sure about that, especially after finishing grad school and starting a postdoc, wasn't easy and it was scary. And academia, or at least most grad programs, don't necessarily prepare you for anything other than academia. And you have to sometimes keep in mind that while your advisor might be your mentor, and maybe even ultimately a friend one day, they are primarily your boss. And not all bosses are always going to have your immediate or ultimate best interest at heart. Some of them will, in a place like this, absolutely. But sometimes I guess what I'm saying is if you change your mind or you want to do something other than what is expected of you, don't let yourself be pushed into a corner just because it's not what everybody else expects of you. If what you're doing doesn't feel right, change it.
I thought a lot about, on my drive down here, whether I was a person who's qualified to give advice to anyone about anything. And I'm not certain that I am. I'm a person who made a lot of mistakes as an undergraduate, and I'm not sure that any amount of advice that I give you here today is going to keep you from making the same mistakes, or is going to prevent you from making any mistakes at all. But I think that's okay, because what I learned as I transitioned from undergraduate to graduate school is that your mistakes aren't the end, and you can always come back from them. So if you have a goal in mind, and you don't necessarily have to have a goal in mind, but if you have some sort of future in mind that you're always working towards, even if you make mistakes that you think might keep you from that future, don't give up on it, because you can always come back from the mistakes that you made. So just don't give up.
I've been trying to think three to narrow it down to. Someone mentioned it earlier. Something I think really take to heart is be honest with yourself. What uneducated you're saying, don't put yourself somewhere you don't really want to be. If you have reservations about pursuing something, maybe that's not the right thing for you. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So be honest with yourself. Don't be afraid to work a little harder than you think you are. One of the questions was here is, what would you do different about your undergrad experience? I would have worked a little harder on assignments, on studying. It's easy when you're doing something to think that it's terrible and it's awful and difficult. But once it's over, it's much better to have done it and be confident in the amount of work you put into it, no matter what that is, whether it's studying for a test or a project in a class. Some of the best advice I've ever gotten was from my dad. He's a carpenter, high school diploma. And he said, anything worth doing is worth doing right the first time. Don't do it and then have to go back and do it again. I think that was 2 or 3. Oh, and so I think as a graduate student, I've seen 2 or 3 panels similar to this where graduates from my program give us their reflections and their perspectives. And I thought of this, I think, when I first got the email asking me to do this. So all the advice we're giving you ultimately is a reflection of what we've done, what we've experienced, and what we've thought we wanted to do at one time or another. So there's no recipe or textbook for success. Ultimately, your success in doing whatever you want to do, you will define that. And I don't think I can put it much better than that. You will define your own success, and there's no textbook recipe for it. You guys will figure it out along the journey that is.
Pretty much going along with everything that's already been said, and what I've been experiencing throughout my transition. And I can't really tell you if it's right or not yet, but I'm pretty sure it is, and I really hope it is. I think everyone should be okay with not knowing what they want right away. I've really had to come to terms with it, and this idea of success, whether or not I'm going to or have achieved it, is something that might weigh on you quite a bit, especially as you're going through this decision-making process of what you're going to do next and how that's going to define you as a person. But I think it's okay to be kind of in between, and just make sure that while you're in between, you're not forgetting how to be a not in between. So make sure you're still working towards something, even if that something is just figuring out exactly what you want to point yourself towards.
I definitely agree with Molly about like not knowing what you want to do is perfectly okay, because I definitely do not know if I want to go to get a master's degree or a PhD, and even though that's what everybody seems to think that you need to have to be successful in science, right now I'm completely content just not having it. But, and maybe one day I will go and get said master's or PhD, but not knowing at this point is, I feel perfectly okay. And I guess the only other piece of advice I have is like, if you do go like into a workplace where you have like a boss, there's always something nice about being sort of like one step ahead of what your boss might want you to do, purely because it's like, if you're more self-sufficient and you just do everything that you think is to complete one job, and then your boss is like, well, did you do this? Did you look at the data? What do you think about it? It's just such a great feeling to be like, I think that because of this, it's like this. Like being able to just have a comprehensive answer to something that your boss wants is a very good thing.
Similar to like what other people say, one thing is like, I can't really tell you what to do. You know, I can't strong arm you into medicine any more than these people can strong arm you into like research or working in a lab. It's kind of the idea of like, you're an expert of yourself, and you got to know where you're at. And a lot of reflection for me was like, when I retire, like, what do I want to accomplish? Like, what do I want to be proud of and stuff like that. And again, as Lisa said, like, even if you don't know quite what you want to do now, that's okay. Like, there's so many people in my class that come from all sorts of jobs, and you know, they've taken off years before they finally decided to go to med school.
Okay, and so with that, we can take a few questions from the audience.
Well, not all at once. Can I ask questions? Well, two questions. Maybe one way.
Dr. K, break the ice.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of you who are in industry jobs, what's the one thing, I don't want 10 minutes, I want one thing, quick answer, that's different from being in school, whether it was grad school or undergrad?
Okay. No tests, I guess.
No taxes?
Tests.
Oh, no tests.
No tests. No homework.
I wasn't used to being given so many protocols. Everyone here was like, figure it out. That's part of the learning experience. But they're like, you need to follow this, please. So I did.
I find that it's a lot more team-oriented. Instead of me having my project that I'm married to for 6 years and I have to sink or swim, everybody's working on the same same thing and we all have the same goal, so it's a lot more team-oriented in that respect.
Pretty good to him, he's on school.
I am not in the industry.
You did a good job, you did a real job.
Yeah, okay.
You're not living on a
It's different.
What was the question? What's the one thing that's the difference from being in school?
Freedom. Freedom.
That sounds really sarcastic.
Well, so this is bad. So this is not again, a bad example because I am in a spot where I don't have very stringent, like I don't have like a real 9 to 5. I'm very flexible with my position. So for me, I do have a little bit of freedom in that regard, but there is quite a bit of responsibility that comes with that. So you have responsibility at your position to do it to the best of your ability and to hold up your part of the team. Whereas in school, you're only letting down yourself and maybe your parents. That would be important. No big deal.
I have another question. Let's do stupid questions. Okay, this is for everybody, but again, quick. So, what's the number one skill that you gained in undergrad that you now use and you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I know this? And it could be something technical like proton NMR, or it could be something like softer, like critical thinking. So, Pete.
Just a general sense of how to behave in a lab and how to do stuff in the lab correctly.
Good. On.
I already said writing. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but
That's good.
writing. Oxford commas. If you don't know what they are, I care. And if I'm ever reading your resume, you want to know.
I learned how to talk in front of a group of people like this. I was very bad at it.
Yeah, you did.
I had it, I just lost it.
And we're skip this.
Yeah.
That's Molly.
Yeah, come back to me.
Oh gosh. Despite the fact that I agree with the whole teamwork idea, how that's a little bit different for working in a lab, I do think I learned that here somewhat, especially working with the chemistry club. There was a lot of working with other people on that and having to figure out how to, have everyone work together instead of doing everything myself, which I'm prone to do and is not good. So yeah, being able to work with others and actually have that be profitable.
I'm gonna say problem solving because there are times when my boss literally just hands me a stack of old papers and he's like, figure out how these people did what they did and create a method. And I then have to like sift through all these different people's research to figure out their methodology and how I need to tweak it so it'll work for what I'm doing.
So I guess a lot of it is, for me, is like I talked earlier, like that kind of science-based thinking or that approach that like makes it easier for me to work through things in like a person, there's something going on with disease or something.
I remember. I would say don't be afraid to ask why, even if the person you're asking why is going to be frustrated with you asking why. There's definitely instances where you need to do something instead of dawdling, but don't be afraid to ask why. Why are you doing something, and what does it mean?
Thank you.
And does it mean done right?
I have a question about professional networking. How important is professional networking, and how have you used that, and how would you recommend others use that?
I would say professional networking is helpful, and the reason I say this is because the reason that I was able to get my internship in the first place was that my boss is somebody that my uncle knew from when he worked at the USDA. So his professional network was able to help me get my foot in the door, and then my boss remembered me when he was looking for a full-time position.
I'm sure it's important. I haven't really used it yet. I know that when given an opportunity to meet any of your coworkers, any of your bosses or your boss's bosses, you should definitely do it, and you should definitely try to make a good impression because you might meet them later on
and it might work in your favor if they like you pretty well to begin with, or have like some vague memory of you being nice to them, or interesting. I guess that's good too.
Thanks.
Sorry.
I guess the only thing I can think of is like for med to like really get to know your professors, kind of because that's going to pay off later on. Like a lot of things, at least in medicine, is like knowing people. Like one of the psychiatrists who I know pretty well on campus, like he's part of the ACGME, which is like where I know MBME is like the boards people for our big boards exam. And he writes questions, and he just like knew the right person to be in this position so young. So I kind of just know he was important in that respect.
I would say, at least in my experience, networking is imperative. I didn't used to put too much stock into LinkedIn because, it's work Facebook. At least that's how I used to think of it. I still kind of think it that way. But I was actually trying to help my older brother with a master's get a job here, so I asked someone here that I knew through a friend of a friend, and I said, this position's open. My brother has a master's in this, and he's done this. What do you think? And within 15 minutes, he responded and said, well, the first thing he needs to do is beef up his LinkedIn profile, make it more current, highlight these things, all these things. And I was just like, wow, you actually, he went above and beyond to do that, but he actually looked critically at a LinkedIn profile. So those are always out there. All someone has to do is search your name, and if it's up to date and accurate, people will learn a lot about you. It never hurts to conduct yourself professionally when you're meeting people. You never know who you're going to meet 2 years later down the road, 10 years later down the road. If you make a good impression the first time, it won't hurt the next time you meet that person.
Professional networking is definitely crucial. So for me, getting my job in between undergraduate and graduate school, that only happened because of people who knew me, who were able to say nice things about me to the person who was potentially hiring me. So, just knowing a bunch of professors here at the school, and then a bunch of people who were already working in labs here was able to help me get that job. In terms of graduate school, I am not quite good at it yet, but I need to be better about it. In order for me to get a postdoc, it's pretty necessary for me to be a networker. So meeting people at conferences is the best way. Being good about all conferences have social mixers that I do not like going to, but but you should go to them because it's just like people standing in a room, and it's fun. It really should be fun, and I need to be better about doing it. So going to conferences, one thing I do is that when speakers come to the college, I always volunteer to go to lunch with them. And that is, I think, the best way to meet people, even better than the weird conference mixers, because you actually sit in a room with them, and it's the first break that they get of the day. And so you just get to have a pretty sociable conversation with someone who's a professor at a different university. And even if that person's not going to take postdocs later on, or is not hiring or whatever, they'll probably know someone who is. And they'll be able to say things about you based on that interaction that they had. So I think taking advantage of opportunities like that, where you can be in a room with someone who could potentially hire you someday, or know someone who's going to hire you, is very important.
I absolutely second that. But also, I did something a little different, my own version of networking. I had sort of decided for myself a long time ago that I wanted to stick around in the Upper Valley, as the Hanover area is known. So what I did, pretty intentionally once I realized that I could do it, was become really, really good at certain things. I became the resident NMR expert because my PI, I hung out with my PI so much. I drove her crazy. But I was the only grad student at that point who knew how to single-handedly operate the magnets, and I volunteered to run experiments for people from labs all across the Upper Valley, and not just that, but with other techniques as well. I intentionally took 3 times as many courses as I needed to take in grad school, and even though I was already sometimes spending ridiculous hours in lab, I always volunteered to do these things and help other people, and I made a point to make it known to somehow indirectly, not in their face, to the professors from those groups that I was doing this. So I intentionally tried to network and meet as many faculty members and people at the biotechs as possible, and to show them what I could do and what I knew and what type of scientist I was. And that paid off in dividends, because then when I emailed this one professor asking if I could postdoc for him, I didn't even interview, he said yes, because I had taken a class with him and I had run a ton of experiments for his students and he knew me. And then same thing, when I applied for these jobs, it was sort of a lot easier for me because I had already made myself known to these people. So that was my own sort of version of networking, was to plan it years in advance and let my actions and my skills speak, not necessarily chit-chat at socials, because I do hate those things, but they are very important. So take as many people out to lunch as you can, it matters.
Yeah, just to echo what everyone said, networking is important, very important. For me, I wouldn't have the job I have now if I wasn't decent at networking, just because I was just enthusiastic about meeting people, and that made an impression on the person who eventually decided to hire me. So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's very important. I've been good at networking for a long time. I've been playing with a band, doing other things like that. It's just comes second nature to me. But if you're not the type of person that's a good networker, like a very extroverted person, it doesn't have to be any difficult thing. Just try to make a good impression, try to be polite, don't be short with your answers or anything like that. Just, you know, make a decent impression at first, and I think you'll find it will go a pretty long way.
Okay, and so with that, I would like to thank you all for coming and attending